Good afternoon. I'm just doing a quick mic check.
Yeah, we got you.
We hear you, Julie. Okay, 2 minutes, folks. Okay, do we have quorum? Okay, we've got quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Lakota people, of the Waikiki and Waikum people. There's no petitions or delegations. There's adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no chair's report. Director compensation. I'm going to hand it first off to staff for,
I'll move receive.
oh, okay, sorry.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the direction of the board, we have brought a director compensation review. I've included it in the report. Amy will give a quick background presentation on it. The report is kind of facts only. We had challenges finding a consultant to prepare. That's not popular amongst consultants to prepare elected officials remunerations reports with recommendations. So the best we could do was basically a consolidated data of other local governments for your review. So I'll give it to Amy. She'll walk through what we have here, and we're happy to answer any questions. But the report does not include any recommendations.
So thank you through the chair to the directors. I'm pleased to present this report prepared by Julie Case, compensation consultant at Drive Organizational Development Limited, which summarizes the findings of the recent review of the director's remuneration and expenses bylaw. This report was considered at the May 22nd, 2024 board meeting, at which time a resolution was passed that the regional district proceed with an independent review of director compensation. Julie was selected to complete this review as she has extensive expertise conducting compensation reviews for regional districts and municipalities across BC. So at our direction, a consultant developed a custom survey and distributed it to directors for feedback, which contributed to the final design of this questionnaire. The review examined comparative regional districts, focusing on remuneration, expenses, and both monetary and non-monetary benefits provided to elected officials. It also captured any planned or proposed changes to remuneration. The findings of that review are included in this report, which is submitted at this time for your consideration. To summarize the report, the annual remuneration data is summarized in Table 1 on the screen, and the Strathcona Regional District's highlighted in blue at the top, with comparison of the median at the bottom. Table 2, next page. Thank you. Table 2 compares the Strathcona Regional District to the median market results. And then detailed in Table 3 are the questions that were composed in the questionnaire and comparing our practice with the participating regional districts. Overall, the SRD's annual base appears comparable to that of other regional districts at the median level, and the SRD's practices seem in line with those of different regional districts for most of the elements we surveyed.
Okay, is there any questions? Director Sinnott?
Apologize, Chair, I had my mouth full. Yeah, so the conclusion was for the base salaries, everything's pretty comparable. We're a little bit on the high side, I saw, on some things. But when it came down to the actual eventual compensation overall, the way that it's done with the EAs doing sort of something out of their own budget, it changes that. Is that correct? Is that sort of where the variance starts to happen? Because I saw other numbers that show that was not within the range at that point.
Yeah, we have a base salary and then, for lack of a better term, a supplemental benefit to EA directors.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that some of the reason that the original base was set the way it was to stop a lot of that extra supplemental charging happening, but over time there's been a bit of creep. Is that fair? I don't know.
Well, I'll do my best over the last 10 years to give you a bit of a history on it, is that there has not been, I would say, a common philosophy amongst the board in terms of remuneration and the difference between, what the base salary would be and then the supplemental between municipal directors and electoral area directors. And so along that path, I'm going to say 5-6 years ago, I think we created a second remuneration bylaw for electoral areas that has been whittled down throughout the years. It had more in past years, and then the board has adopted a number of things that were in that bylaw, and so reduced that remuneration bylaw, such as the 1.65 bump to CPI. That's in the parent bylaw, if you will, for remuneration. So there was a second bylaw created by EA directors to, again, for lack of a better term, give their remuneration a bump beyond base. So we had a consultant 10 years ago prepare a report for the board. The board didn't care for that, the results and the recommendations from that. And so what you have here is basically an in-house created bylaw on remuneration that we have had for probably the last 5 or 6 years.
I mean, I'd like to hear from some of the EA directors as to what they think is a reasonable compensation for the work they do, because some of the work that we're doing and doing the same meetings, we're not getting compensated the same way they are. So I think there's a bit of a dichotomy. So if we go to certain events as municipal directors for the Strathcona Regional District, we don't get the extra supplements, but I understand the EA directors do. And I'm just trying to understand in terms of the rationale to why that seems to be a thing that the EAs should pay out of their particular budgets versus not. I'm just trying to understand the logic for the public purse. Thanks.
Does staff have an answer to that?
I think Director Sinnott wanted to hear from an EA director, correct? I'm happy to answer, but.
Well, if staff can answer if they doesn't want to, but if the EAs want to chirp up, that's great.
Well, I think it's more, to be honest, it's there's a number of factors from, Director Wally he's been around, so he was part of it, but there was a few factors that contributed to it along the way. Is that there was a taxable, there was an exempt status to a portion of the elected officials' remuneration that was reduced, and so there was some discussion about how to compensate for that. And there was also, again, some discussion over, so at the regional board, there's municipal directors come here and they're paid at their municipality, and then they come here and get paid. And then the electoral areas, this is their form of government. So how to consolidate their representation in this form of government and compensate them. So again, what we have here was built mostly in-house because we have not had in 10 years for sure, we haven't had an external review and recommendation. So I think likely Director Wally can speak to some of the philosophy with it.
Director Wally?
Thank you. I think Mr. Leach stole most of my thunder there, but as you'll recall, yes, we had 1/3 of our income was tax-free, and then the government changed that. So that made an enormous difference. So every jurisdiction in the province that I'm aware of did the exact same thing we did. We just increased our salaries to compensate for that loss that we had. The other thing I would like to point out to you is that every 6 years in the past since this board began, we used to have a remuneration review. And it was always bad optics in the press, to tell you the truth. And what would happen is after 6 years with no increase, come the 6th year, we would look for maybe 10%, and that's always kind of a big number that doesn't look that great. And it was the same thing when I ran contracts for McMillan Bloedel, that the manager never wanted to let the contractor get an increase, but over time, eventually, they had to get one, and then it had to be enormous. So that's why I put in that 1.6% annual increase, which over 6 years compounds to 10%. And the idea was we would never have to ask for an increase again. And the municipalities liked that particular thing. So after the electors adopted in our remuneration bylaw, the municipalities adopted it for themselves as well. So that's the history behind it. I think it works well.
Director Dahl?
I just want to make a comment referring back to what Mr. Leach said about municipal councillors being paid for being a councillor and then getting their remuneration for being a director here. When you add municipal directors' remuneration here and what they're paid as a councillor, it still doesn't come close to what electoral area directors draw. So I just wanted to make that point that
So I'll make
comparing the two, even when you add them together, isn't
don't disagree.
equitable.
I'm solely trying to represent the history on it, not a justification.
Yeah, so I just realized that this is an open meeting, and the Campbell River Mirror likes to take things somewhat out of context. So I want it to be crystal clear
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Me
that when
too.
you add them together, they still don't add up.
Yeah, and just so anyone knows, when we say a base salary, we're just using the municipal director as the base salary. I do not know where that ever came from. And again, some brief history on that. When 10 years ago we had a consultant and the board did not care for the results of that, that base salary, I don't think changed. So if you held a gun to my head, I cannot say we've ever had a review recommendation of what a municipal or a base salary remuneration is. So that 18 and change that you see we're calling a base salary, that has been with us for many, many, many years, and we've never had anything. So when you see that in base, where'd it come from? It's been here a long time.
Director Wally?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the intent of the municipal directors are, but like electoral area directors, if you're looking for a raise, it would be very simple for yourselves through your own municipal administration service to give yourselves whatever you feel is appropriate if you feel you're underpaid.
Director Dahl?
I haven't heard any suggestion by any municipal directors that they're looking for a raise, so I'm not sure where that comment comes from. I was just clarifying a statement that had been made already.
Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I was hoping to see in the report, and I didn't, is, first of all, I'm always confused with the meeting pay, particularly with the EAs where, you know, if we choose to, we could bill for senior staff time. We could be billing for time that we would spend with meetings with senior levels of government. I've never done that. And I honestly don't think that we should be billing for that. I think that if we were looking at a difference in terms of base salary, the EAs are already paid quite well in the base salary. Why would we bill for those extra meetings? I'll give you a prime example, and I'm not pointing to any directors, but how many, when we went out to Walters Cove, billed those as being meeting days that were billed time versus those that didn't? So that's an example. When we attend conferences, why is that a billed day? I don't understand that. I've never billed for it. So those were the kinds of things that I find that are interesting with the pay. You know, I've never billed a single meeting anywhere. So hopefully the other EAs and directors can chime in on that.
I don't know if they can, because the other than Director Wally, none of the EAs have been here when this bylaw was created, but that again came at the direction of those EA directors and having compensable meetings on there. So there's a list of, I don't know, 10 compensable meetings. There's things like meetings with the CEO, senior government officials, and so on and so forth. So that there's just a list of compensable meetings that EA directors can bill for. And it resides in the EA bylaw. It is a little bit unique. Again, it was at the direction of the board, so that I'll say as a high level, there's certainly no abuse of that. I think everyone's aware that we had an issue of abuse of that by a certain director in the past. But those are just there for directors to bill should they. I don't think you don't have to bill for them. I don't think there is any abuse of that. It was fairly unique too, in that just for example, that if there was a commensable meeting with the CEO, but if you were an EA director, you could make a commensable meeting. But if you were a municipal director and you met with the CEO or senior government, there was no compensable. Again, I think that was an isolated incident for billing, because I think for the most part there's no abuse, and we had an incident of a single director in the past, but they're there and they're available for EA directors, and certainly if the board, municipal directors wanted to have that included in their remuneration bylaw, they could simply do that. And then, again, it's left for directors to bill of what the bylaw allows you to.
Director Wally? Director Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. And just a question in a different direction on comprehensive health, dental benefits, which are included and greatly appreciated. So just I noticed in a list here in terms of retirement and continuation of those benefits after you leave the board. Is that been continued? I think with Green Shields, that was the case where you could, keep paying your benefits and retain your comprehensive. Does that continue?
I don't know if that was there, but we can certainly explore it. Just because I was involved with it, it truly does warm my heart that you say you appreciate the benefits, because what happened, and you were here, when we had a benefit review, it's a very interesting process. It's kind of like going through a mortgage broker of benefits. And we hadn't done this in this organization for quite some time, so I undertook it early when I got here. There was a significant savings, net savings to the organization, and so we offered benefits to the board, as there was no net increase in requisition because we were going to save so much, and they're really an excellent benefit package. So my memory doesn't tell me that we had the ability to, but we can certainly look into that ability for continuation of benefits. I mean, anything is on the table when we talk to the provider. We can certainly look at that. Yeah.
Director Wally.
Yeah, I like that suggestion, Director Kerr. I think that would be good. The other thing is, of course, when you get to my age, a lot of those benefits don't apply anymore because you're cut off, I think, at 80 or whatever it is. So I don't know if there's any way that those can continue at least while you're in office.
I'm going to say optimistically, see what Amy gives me the stink eye or not. There's certain it wouldn't be. The insurance providers don't want it. But optimistically, I would think about things like dental and eye and hearing may. I think there's a hard line over age and life insurance, but I think there's probably a handful that can continue. There's no real age limit to, let's say, dental or hearing, I don't think. So we can certainly look into that.
I was going to make one comment. I think with the municipal pensions that we're able to continue like I have continued my benefits, and I think at 80 we don't get cut off.
It may, there's likely a cost to that. Yeah. Like you're paying. So I think what Director Kerr is saying is there a cost? What would that be? And how could we manage that? So again, certainly could look into that. But because Director Wally's asked a few times, we've explored it. I'm pretty certain there's a hard line on the age and life insurance. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah.
Director Sinnott.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And I'll say this sort of arose in terms of my interest as a result of going for a walk with Director Colburn in Victoria. I think can't remember which conference it was, probably AVICC. And sort of finding out what a mayor of a small village earned relative to the pay at the SRD. And it's quite small. Like her pay is very small. And my concern being, not comparing necessarily a small area like Zabelas to like a greater area of some of our EAs, but still the discrepancy in the pay levels was so significant it concerned me for the public good in terms of rural area representation. So I have Schedule 5 for our scheduled remuneration expenses is disclosed publicly to the public with respect to our comprehensive annual financial report. And just so everyone understands the discrepancy levels, yes, we have the chair who has a remuneration total at $55,000. Then the various municipal directors are in the $20,000 to $21,000 range. There's one at $23,000, which is Director Colburn. Then we have our electoral area remuneration, and it's so we've got everyone is above $67,000. Just so understand, it's three times the level of the municipal directors. That's before the expenses. So at the end of the day, I'm still concerned that the amount of compensation for EAs is out of range, and it's not serving the public good. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I missed the first 6 minutes of this. Did we establish how the cost for area director remuneration is allocated or who pays ultimately?
So I'm going to say something right now, and then we've proposed something in, let's say, 15 minutes. So there's two, again, for lack of a better term, there's a base salary plus or minus about 18,000. Right now, EA directors are paying their base salary and their quote-unquote supplement out of the EA admin. And the rest are through because there's only base salaries for municipal directors, those are all paid for by municipal admin. So that's today. So what the EAs are paying, they're all paying themselves, and Campbell River in municipal administration is paying about 97% of the base salary of the rest. So in the allocation policy, we're very unique in that, meaning us and Comox are the only two doing it, and we're doing it because we're a divorce of Comox, suggesting put all base pay in general government, so everyone's contributing to base pay, and then the supplement remains in EA admin. Does that make sense? Okay.
So going around the table, Director Vana, do you have anything you want to add or comment?
No, I think Dave covered everything. I think answered the questions. I know the Campbell River mayor salary is like 75,000 or something, and the councillors there are about 30,000. And people often, joke with me like, "Oh, you're the mayor of Cortez." I'm like, "No, I'm not the mayor of Cortez. I'm the regional director." But I think my position of my community is somewhere in between a sort of councillor and mayor. I think that's where I kind of see it as being reasonable. And to your point of municipal directors not being paid enough at their cities, I totally agree. And I think those municipalities could increase those salaries to be more fair.
Director Lanyon and then Director Baker.
Sure. Yeah, I think given the amount of work involved with being an area director, like 60 grand a year is not a lot of money at all. So on that basis, I have no issue at all with how much they're paid. The issue, I guess, I just cannot understand why the comparator regional districts are like half of what we are. It's pretty surprising, and I don't care as long as Campbell River isn't bearing that burden. If that is borne by the constituents of those areas, that is their business, in my view. So I guess we'll just maybe get a bit more clarity as we go.
No, you're 100% right. So we structured it so, again, the supplement is, it's currently the 100% of it is paid by the EA directors' communities. I'm suggesting the base salary of everybody be in, but the supplement remains there. Their compensable meetings remain there, so it isn't there. And I've worked for 4 regional districts. My personal opinion is it feels often like a race to the bottom, in that they just, I think most of elected officials in these other areas wouldn't say they're certainly overpaid, that the numbers aren't very impressive, you're not getting rich by there, but I think they're afraid to, increase their salaries because of the sensitivity. But if you privately polled them, I'm sure they would agree. And I think the regional district was bold enough several years ago to, to say, hey, we're going to break free from the group. The other thing too with it, just because what we went through with the consultant, nobody wants to do this work. So the numbers you see are just, I'm going to guess they're mostly in-house because, consultants consider this work career limiting. And we had a very bad experience 10 years ago with our consultant. And so you're seeing a bunch of in-house numbers. I bet that's why you see them low and or all over the place. You're going to have some that break free and some are just going to continue on with what they've had from ever ago. Again, our base salary, that 18 and change, whatever it is, I couldn't tell you how that was developed, but it was developed a long time ago. So.
First, I want to go back and agree with Director Kerr. I think on the benefits after we leave office is a very important thing. Second, in municipalities, the smaller municipalities can't afford to pay their councilmen or their mayors very much money at all. We don't have the tax base. We don't have the money for it. So that's why, like Zabalas and some of the other smaller communities, like Sayward, for example, that's why our remuneration is quite low. There's just no money.
Director Senate.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there wasn't a misunderstanding with Director Van Esch. I wasn't advocating that the City of Camp River was looking for increases. I was just pointing out that the smaller communities, as Director Baker has said, just don't have the ability to pay. And I was shocked by the low level of pay, given the responsibilities, for example, that like Mayor Colburn has on her plate. And that caused me to be greatly concerned relative to the responsibilities that other EAs have, because they're in a bigger organization. They're technically not empowered like mayors are, or responsible like mayors are for their communities. So that was a great concern to me. And if we can somehow arise out of this to find a way to properly compensate or lobby UBCM or the province to find a way to properly compensate places that don't have the significant tax base, it would be something I would accept. And I agree with Director Lanyon that, the range is not wrong. It's just shockingly low in other places as well. So long as the people who are electing you are aware of the compensation levels and aware that what they're doing, in terms of transparency. I know we do the report that's in our financial statements. I would prefer that we do more comprehensive disclosure above and beyond just the minimum so that the voters are aware. Thank you.
Just, if I may, Mr. Chair, a quick comment on what the province UBCM, they're going to tell you already have a vehicle. It's the regional district. You can vote on whatever enumeration you want, however you want to slice it up. So I don't think they're going to do anything for you because we have the tools here if you want to do it. We're quite interesting here in this regional district, the dichotomy between the size of the municipalities. So you got, Camp River, 40,000, and Zabalas at, 150. In that, you'll have, and then you have electoral areas that are often as big as some municipalities in the province. So I think it was Director Davis that said a couple months ago that inspired, your resolution is that if it wasn't for the regional district and the compensation they get here, I think Director Baker can speak to it. I mean, you're talking about $1,000 a year, as mayor kind of deal. Like, it's very low. So I think Director Davis said if it wasn't for the compensation he received at the regional district, he could not be the mayor and likely nobody else. So that's the tool that the province is going to point you. I don't think they're going to provide any success and say, sort it out in-house, you've got resources.
So online, we have Director Lott, Director Davis, and Director Colburn. So does anybody online want to make any comments? Just give me raise your hand if you want to talk. Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and it is really sensitive for us small communities. We struggle with paying ourselves more money. Like, I get maybe $12,000 a year. What we've done is added a COLA increase for myself and the councillors, because we thought that was an easier way of moving this ahead. and also gave ourselves medical and dental, but at the same time, we extended that to all our staff, including Public Works, which does increase costs for taxpayers. But we were trying to do it in a way that was more palatable, so that's how we've been dealing with it here. And that is true that I did say before that I certainly receive more money from the regional district, and I appreciate that, because as a regional district, it has deeper pockets than the 400 or 500 people that we have in our community. So, yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you. Director Coburn, you had your hand up?
I did have my hand up, but I think that Director Davis pretty much caught in a nutshell, what I was going to say. The pot is just not there. And with the understanding that we know that Campbell River pays the biggest portion, and that is proportionate to their population, the conversation that I had with Director Sinich was just kind of, I don't think there's any awareness of, what we do, how many hours we put in, what we're doing, even on a small basis like ours, even in the village of Zabalas, a lot of the work we do is quite regional, right? So we're also taking care of, our own water, sewer, garbage, those are kind of things and services for our residents, but also making sure, we're advocating for roads and internet and cell service up the highway and all of those kinds of things. I am a director of this board. That is the beast that the province has laid out for us. And I'm grateful to get what I do from the regional district. And that's why, making sure that we are prepared, that we're doing the best we can while we're in this room shows the respect that we give that position. And so I think he covered off. It's just where the pots are. There's 129 people that pay for my whatever $4,000 a year to do this job. So, and it's hard work. This is not that we don't do that for them, right? This is all. I think we can all say that this is all hard work. We care about our communities, and so it is what it is. It does seem the structure of regional districts are inherently. The fair is, it's all perspective.
Thank you, Director Coburn. Just going back, years ago when I had hair, in the early 80s, there wasn't email. Fax machines were just coming in. And the duties and responsibilities of an elected official was quite different. When you were in public, as a public official, you had people coming up to you, whether you're in a restaurant or at a theater, that's where you were approached. Now, you've got email, and it's easy for people to send an email out rather than approach you. I mean, I don't think I'm any different than any council member. There's a lot of emails to go through. It's time consuming. Originally, a stipend was just that, was a stipend. It's not a job. You were elected to an office, and the stipend originally was to reimburse the elected official for lost wages to attend meetings and costs incurred to meet with your constituents. That has all changed now. People think this is a job. This is part of people's primary source of income. It's no longer a reimbursement. It's a way to make a living. So the whole parameters of remuneration has changed dramatically since the 80s. And we're experiencing that now. And it's hard to, it's hard to say, okay, here's what it was in the 80s, here's what it is now. Total different time frame, total different, we have more complex issues we're dealing with. rather than in the 80s where things were still contentious, but they were a little more clearer. There were fewer options. And council had to make, and the board had to make a difficult decision between 2 or 3 options. Now, sometimes I don't know, at the staff level, when you're making recommendations, sometimes there's 6 or 7 different options. And it's more work to not only list those options, but then to recommend an option. So there's more staff work as well. But the role of the elected official has changed dramatically, and it's turned into, a way of making a living rather than serving the public and setting public policy. Now, for me, I'm retired now, but Director Lanyon, Director Sinnott, Director Dahl. I mean, I'm sure Director Lanyon has put clients off to meet later today or tomorrow because he wanted to be here to attend this meeting. So he's not missing out on the income necessarily, but he's got to delay everything. He's got more things to balance. So I do sympathize for those still working. I'm glad I'm retired. I don't know where I'd find the time to work full time the way I did and be elected official. So those are some thoughts that I have. I would also, I think we've all watched the Metro Vancouver scenario, and I would like to see a summary of all board members and have staff. I don't think it would take more than 2 or 3 hours, but to list each director and what we're getting at the regional district level, at the regional hospital district level, solid waste management, and so forth. List all the remunerations that were provided and just see how we compare. Pardon me. I don't think we're at the level of Greater Vancouver Regional District, but that was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener for a lot of people. And I just wondering, just the question is, how much compensation is enough? That's the $1 million question. And so the first question is, how much is needed rather than what's being received? Director Coburn, you have some additional thoughts?
If I may just jump in, I'm going to, on Director Dahl's comments earlier, I'm going to clear the air. Staff, as you know, do not get additional pay for going to solid waste or hospital or those things. So happy to, if the board makes a recommendation about consolidating, but you mentioned staff and we don't get paid more for those.
No, I wasn't referring to staff. I was just referring to elected officials. And it's a part of transparency. I think the public deserves to know. I don't think that the public needs to undertake a lot of research in order to figure out what that is. We should be presenting it and saying, look, this is what it is.
So I mentioned this to Director Sinnott when she asked. The SOFI report you see is a statutory requirement, and it does not require us to put that in, so we don't. If the board wants us to include that, we'll need a resolution to consolidate that info.
So on the speakers list is Director Coburn and then Director Wally.
I was just going to add that those are also participatory. So yes, I am, as part of an SRD director, I am the director for the Comox North Waste Management, the hospital district. There's ICT advisor. There's all these things. However, any of those that I can delegate, because I do hold a full-time job, I delegate. So actually, I don't get the dollars for those go to my alternate so it may be a little more difficult than you might think in some of these areas where we do travel far and try to come on via Zoom and things like that to kind of to make that a little more palatable. and easier for us to access when we've got other things going on in our own home communities. So just kind of putting that out there that it may be more difficult in some instances to tabulate that.
Thank you. Director Wally?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that tracks every penny from all the boards. So on an annual basis, hospitals between $850 and $900, something like that. And solid waste is around $1,100 or $1,200 on an annual basis. And now most of us are attending, not all of us, but most of us are attending those meetings online, so there's no travel. But the travel is just reimbursement for expenses. I mean, there's no salary portion in that. I mean, it's easy enough, $160 for meetings, and there's only a few meetings a year.
Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on transparency in the SOFI report. One of the things that I always find with the SOFI report is it tends to be very general. And when we are able to bill for extra meetings and so forth, it would be nice to see a SOFI report that is a little bit more detailed, so that, you know, if I was a general person of the public and looking at it, I think it would probably help people have a better understanding of, you know, how some of these how things are paid to the directors. The other thing that I would like to see with the SOFA report, if it's possible, is, again, with expenses, it tends to be a lump sum, but it would be interesting to see that breakdown in terms of expenses to attend things versus expenses for printing and those kinds of things. I don't know if that's possible. But again, when I take a look at SOFA reports, they tend to be a little bit misleading when you read them because everything's just kind of lumped together. That's just my thoughts.
Director Wally?
Yeah, maybe staff can confirm if I'm right or not, but aren't all our expense claims online, available to the public?
Yeah, we had a resolution several years ago that we post expenses online. So those are available. And again, just on Director Rice's comments, we can dissect anything that you want us to do. I mean, that we can do that. What you're seeing as SOFI is reflecting the statutory requirement and definition. So that's why that's there. But if the board wants us to dissect that stuff, we certainly can.
So I just want to point out, Mr. Chair, that any constituent can look at their director's claims online and see exactly what they're getting billed for.
So we have a motion on the floor to receive. Any further questions, comments, concerns? All opposed? Okay, it's carried.
Chair, I have a supplemental.
Oh, Director Sinnott.
Yeah, thank you. Based on what our CAO has mentioned in terms of getting a staff report to look at working with the municipalities and developing a public-facing comprehensive disclosure of overall compensation for elected officials for the SRD. I think just to look at various options that we could look at and make it more available to the public than digging into a website using Facebook and other social media with links.
Was that a motion?
Director Sinnott was
Motion. There was a motion for staff to come back with a report to work with the municipalities on options to do better public disclosure of our comprehensive remuneration for the public.
Okay, is there a seconder?
Second.
Director Davis seconds. Any discussion?
I have a question. Why just municipalities?
Well, the SRD has to work with the municipalities to get the overall compensation, doesn't have to work with itself.
Oh, so you're looking for staff to provide a compensation that shows what directors are getting at their municipalities?
As well.
As well, okay, yeah,
Like
that's
work
clear.
together, because the municipality could publish it as well as the SRD, everyone agrees what the numbers are.
So just
I
for
support that.
clarity, the intent is how, because you said municipalities, do you want to?
The Comox Valley Regional District.
Right, but Director Chapman has said pay for hospital and solid waste. Do you want that included? or
Yes,
we just-
basically what happens when you get elected? What are you getting? So the public knows.
Okay.
Okay, was there a seconder to that? Davis. Oh, Martin Davis did, thank you. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, the next is the corporate administrative support cost allocation policy. And I'll open it up to staff for comments. Sorry? Okay, Director Wally moves,
Second.
Director Von Esch seconds. Okay, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mike has a quick PowerPoint just to go through the allocation policy. High level, not trying to steal his thunder, but at the direction of the board, what we've done is taken what we provided to the board at the financial planning, the allocations, and put that into policy format. So there should be there's nothing new in that you didn't see in the financial planning process. It mirrors that. And then as the direction was to look at the allocation policy, this is just so everybody knows, things that can be directly charged to a service, nothing changes in terms of that. So we don't need any of that in the policy. You must charge a service for what they're using. So this focuses on the corporate administration. And as we were under a fairly tight time crunch when it came to the budget, there is, as I alluded to, Director Lanyon, a simple addition recommendation that we've included here as far as director remuneration.
Thanks, everyone. There'll be two parts to this presentation. First is the actual policy we discussed, and then the additional considerations to go through. So this is just a general summary of the overall effect of the new policy. Long story short, we're just taking costs that have a regional benefit. We're charging them to the entire region to generate a equivalent mill rate, and then if it's to any of the committees or sub-regional service, they should be charged accordingly. So for Strathcona Gardens, for example, we take a slice of the overhead that we could reasonably attribute for the Strathcona Gardens, and we would put it to that function, and then it would be shared amongst the jurisdiction that pays into that service. And by equal in this slide, we're of course referring to the mill rate per thousand. There will be an unequal overall dollar share going to each municipality, but with the intent of generating the same tax rate per $1,000. So that's the general overall effect. These are the amounts that we came up with the original analysis. So when we say general administration, of course, there's several different subcategories of that, each with a different benefit. So staff went through to find the best or overall fair allocation of how that could get distributed for the cost. Of course, there's no perfect system. But we think compared to the last policy, this is definitely an upgrade because every category is logically assessed, and we're not really basing the distribution on some numbers that may not necessarily correlate with how the underlying activity is done. And then as an added benefit, the new policy will be a lot easier to administrate anyway, so it kind of cuts down on the overhead in that regard, and we can focus our efforts elsewhere.
And so just as I alluded to earlier, these numbers you see mirror what we did in the financial planning and adoption of the financial plan in late March. There's no change to these.
Mm-hmm. So we've attached a policy that reflects these numbers for discussion, but while we're in the midst of it, and of course with the last presentation, there's one other item we bring forward for consideration. So again, the overall theory with the new overhead policy or the new administration cost policy is the regional costs get funded regionally, but we actually have other pockets of regional costs that don't generate an even mill rate. So the corporate admin allocation has always focused on staff costs, but we've never looked at elected official and meeting expenses. Currently, those get funded through the Function 100 Municipal Administration, which is shared by municipalities, and the 130 electoral area, which is just funded by the electoral areas. So this is a kind of a unique setup for the SRD. Us in Comox Valley have this system, whereas most regional districts would take cost to govern the regional board, and then they'd put that into one administrative pot, and then which is funded by the whole region. So everybody would pay the same mill rate for all the regional governance. So even if you look at all the costs for this meeting, for example, and the people around these tables, there's actually 3 different mill rates are being in effect right now. The electoral areas are under one, the municipal administration is under, or all the municipal directors are getting a different mill rate for their constituents, and then the chair generates a different mill rate than that. So it kind of bodes, there's I guess a line of logic that if this is providing an equal regional benefit, perhaps the cost of this meeting should be shared regionally.
So if I can softly interpret what, Mike, this is a good example of what we're doing here. This is a committee of the whole. Everything we're doing here is region-based. Everyone's, let's say, simply remuneration for this should come out of general admin because it is definitely for the benefit of the region. So what we've attempted to do in here is dissect those things and consolidate them into areas where there's a regional benefit. We're working on regional matters, and when there isn't, to keep them in their either municipal or electoral area admin.
So here's a quick list of costs that are currently not shared regionally. So the base pay of the director's salary is we'll discuss. Any of the board cow, the First Nations meeting pay, that would generate different mill rates around. The chair and the vice chair premiums, we the policy says to split those 50-50, so that generates the different a different mill rate for the chair and all the meeting expenses, and as well as any of the training travel for all the board and regional events. Like say, if we send an electoral area director, it comes out of the electoral area pot. If we send a municipal director, it comes out of the municipal pot. And so you'd have 2 directors going to the same meeting to benefit the region, and then the constituents just end up paying a different mill rate. And so that's the way it was designed, but it's possibly something to consider now that we're looking at the overhead policy or the administration policy. So the biggest part of this is of the regional expenses, of course, would be salaries. So what we've come up with here is just a little table that kind of discloses how the regional board salaries would be, base salaries would be expensed at, more commonly expensed at the other regional districts we looked at. So for this table is just what we consider like the base of the standard pay. I'm ignoring all the chair premiums and meeting pays and any of the other additional pays like travel. So this is just the base. I think as in our last presentation we discussed, nowhere in any of our bylaws do we actually define what a base is. So I've kind of taken the assumption that the first $18,588 that every director receives is for a regional purpose, and then the SRD, and just like every other regional district BC, they pay an additional amount to the EA directors for the additional governance duties. And that is generally funded out of an EA pot. So if you were to take our total $432,000 of director remuneration, this is typically how it would get funded through, or at many of the other regional districts that we saw. If we were to expand that to the overall analysis and include actually the meeting times, director pay, and not director pay, but travel time, education, and everything else. The top table shows the total current budgets, and then the $644,000 in the second column of the top table. That's what, when we went through each of the 2 budgets, I would consider the regional portion of those budgets. And so if we were to move those over to general administration, the last column shows what would be left in the function 100 and the 130. So that $644,000 we would propose to move that into general administration that would follow the common split to, so everybody at the regional table would generate the same mill rate for all the taxpayers. So that would take out $445,000 from municipal admin, take out the $200,000 from the electrical admin, move that all over to general, and then you can see the annual total of what the different costs are. So this would essentially shift some costs from the electoral areas back over to the municipalities. And then a lot of this variance is just caused by, like I say, that 50-50 split that we do for a lot of the expenses.
So if I can, what you're looking at for the most part is in right now municipal admin function, the lion's share of that is paid for director remuneration. About 97% of that is paid by Campbell River. So when Mike says most other regional districts, we can't find any regional district other than Comox that does it this way, and we obviously inherited it. Nobody else is doing it. They take that municipal admin, those salaries, and put them into general admin. So Campbell River would go from paying 97% of the municipal salaries put in general admin and 70%. And then the same for electoral areas is they're paying their own base salary. So you take that base salary that they're working for the regional district and you put that they're paying 100% of that, and then that goes into general admin, of which they'll pay a varying percentage of that. So it's thinning out those two budgets, putting them, when you're working on regional business, into general admin, where the Local Government Act requires everyone to share by assessment. It is the easiest, fairest way. It has been for years puzzling why or how Comox ever developed a system where only municipal directors paid for other municipal directors. I've never seen that before. So again, it takes those salaries of both EA and Muni admin, puts them in general admin, changes the allocation, gives us everyone a similar mill rate about how we're paid in terms of remuneration. End of the day, there's a little bit fluctuation up and down. There's a small financial benefit to the electoral areas and to the municipalities. Because Muni Admin has a surplus that we've been carrying forward, there will be no net effect because we'll apply that surplus to the municipalities, and there won't be any negative effect to the municipal admin budget. So that is what embedded in the policy, other than what you've seen already at the financial planning. We mirrored that, put it into a policy, and we're suggesting that we take the remuneration for municipal admin, EA admin, consolidate the bases into general admin and share on that basis. That would be our only additional recommendation to the policy.
I didn't have any more.
Thank you for your presentation and PowerPoint. Director Wally, anybody else?
Yeah,
And Director Sinnott and Director Mulwiney.
Thanks, staff, for that report. This is a thorough analysis. I think it's fair, and I like it. I think it's good.
Director Sinnott?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just so I understand, this isn't going to affect us this year. We're just moving some money from different pots, but it'll be affecting us going forward. I
Yes,
just
so
need to know if it's material. Thank you.
No, it's not material. So what we did this year in this budget, if you adopt this policy, we'll do the same thing next year. We'll amend the remuneration in the EA and Muni admin. That will not have a material effect at all. That addition, so what you saw in financial planning this year will be reflected in the policy and will be reflected in the budget, which will mirror what we did this year.
But just to be clear, what Director Lanyon had suggested that he was fine with is if the people were doing the work, it was coming out of their budget. Now this is moving into a general admin budget.
A portion of it.
Yeah, but it's still got a different allocation based on basically usage, right? So that's the conceptual idea. We've already doing the usage sort of allocation to now it moving into it and just being handled consistently. Is that my understanding?
And I'd like to add fairly to it because, you know, whether you're an EA director So let's say if you're a municipal director, you're 100% a regional director. Everything you come here is regional. If you're an EA director, you're also a regional director. So what everybody else is doing is taking the base out of that. So taking the base out of an electoral area director and share that equally. The rest of it remains in there. So if that makes sense, what Director Lanyon asked, this absolutely reflects that, is that when we talk and conduct regional business, that base of that is shared by everyone in general admin as per local government allocations. And anything beyond that, above that, is shared independently throughout the EAs.
So just so I'm clear, if some anomaly happened, and for whatever reason, the EEAs had to do 10 times more work and they had individual work that came out of their area, that's not being borne by this new allocation into the municipalities.
No,
it's going to stay in theirs, right?
No, and so unless let's say the board decided to increase the base remuneration, everyone would go up with that. But let's say the EAs came and said, we're doing so much more work, we need $10,000 more a year. That would still remain in their supplement in their EA admin budget.
Keep back up one slide, Edie.
Okay, we have,
I was going to say, just for further clarification, so if this change was to occur, the municipal administration budget would go down to about $155,000. There's currently about a $90,000 surplus that we've been carrying forward. So surplus usually falls in line with the overall budget. So yeah, we would probably get assumed over several years unless you wanted a larger tax decline.
okay, we have Director Mawhinney, we have Director Von Esch, and we have Director Ben. Go ahead, Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I will admit that I was a little confused about the report having sort of two very separate parts, because at the February 19th board meeting, we, as a board, received a report on support service cost allocations, and we had vigorous debate, and we moved that it be referred to a committee of the whole meeting. And so I sort of anticipated that report would be appended to this report to provide us context and a reminder, and that wasn't there. And I just wanted to, I do have a comment more on the policy piece, because to me, there's like two separate topics here. The potentially changing of funding from electoral area admin and municipal admin into general admin of salaries or base salaries, is what we're calling it. And I feel like that's quite separate than the policy. So my question for staff is the reason that these are connected in this report because there's a consideration for including this in the policy?
Well, that's a recommendation that be included in the policy. Again, given the constraints that we had on the budget, if we had more time, we would have recommended this in the allocation. What we did was do, I guess 90% of it. When we review the whole general admin allocation, to me, this sticks out like a real oddity in it. So this is being recommended to be included in the allocation policy. So it's two parts in terms of the presentation, but it's all part of the allocation policy.
Okay, because I thought it was called a support services cost allocation item earlier. So
you don't use support services. We've abandoned that. So no longer, I don't want to refer to support services. That's what we used to do. So it's unlikely you see the word support services in here. We're trying to abandon that.
Okay, so we're just calling it support costs. Is that correct?
Administrative support costs. I mean, what you need to understand here is that things that are not directly allocated, that you need to find a way to split and share them amongst time and benefit and resources used. So what you see in here is that. So we adopted that philosophy at the financial planning. We've put that part into the allocation policy. Now what we've all added to it saying, look, if we had more time, we would have suggested this because this stands out. It lacks consistency and fairness. It doesn't make material change, but it certainly adopts a philosophy of, look, the local government act says when you're all working on board issues, you're all paid out of general admin and you're allocated by assessment. So we're taking that and put it in. So was it looked, I mean, it's lasted for years. This is the really odd one. Has it been reasonable that Campbell River has paid 97% of the other municipalities' remuneration for the last 18 years? No, why would they pay 97% when their general admin allocation is 70? That's their share, that's they pay. And so we're saying put that in there. We should have done that from day one. The same argument is when an electoral area director is working, they're doing regional work as well. Why are they paying their own base pay? So take that base pay, put that in general admin. We work towards, we have expenses on regional items. We all pay and contribute as per the Local Government Act under general admin. When we go outside that framework, this policy then identifies where those monies come from.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So this policy, as it's been presented to us today, is called the Corporate Administrative Support Allocation, and you're recommending that this base salary of directors is a good fit for this policy.
Yeah. So again, we're taking the base salary for the municipal directors, taking it out of municipal admin, where for example, Campbell River pays 97%. We're putting in general admin, they'll pay 70%. We're taking your base salary out of electoral area admin, where you pay 100%, and we're putting in general admin, where you'll pay a fraction of that.
Right.
I got a brief add. I think that's the overall gist of it is the question is, should regional administration costs be shared regionally? So that's why we lumped everything together. So the first half always focused on the staff costs, but both staff and directors regionally administer. So it just kind of makes sense that there should be the same regional mill rate applied to it. So anyway, that's the idea of why combining the two reports, better to be complete, hit it all at once.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I have a question about the policy or comment on the policy, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So in regards to the policy, it has number 111, the function 111 is the general administration management, and it includes consulting costs for regional services, as well as legal costs incurred by the board, along with other costs for wages and benefits for corporate staff and the CAO. So when I look at that, I want to remind my fellow directors that electoral area directors are paying their share, according to a conversation that I had with Mike Harmson, 27% of the general administration function, as well as the EA function. So the way that this policy is currently worded would mean that electoral areas would be paying 60% of all legal and consulting expenses that the board chooses to move forward with, as well, of course, as advertising and office expenses. And it really made me think about how the board recently requested reports for 2 regional services, one on regional tourism and another on regional arts and culture. And they may be written by consultants. And I mean, we did just receive a report that was written by a consultant on remuneration. So the way that this policy is framed, the cost of hiring that consultant to do that work would fall 60% onto the electoral areas. And that's also regarding any legal costs that the board chooses to move forward with. And it just, I guess, speaking as an electoral area director, that does not seem fair or equitable, which is the first guiding principle that the policy states.
Yeah, it's hard to, because these are essentially annual rates, like the overall rates. So it's hard to look at one specific example and then use a combined.
I'm going to cut you off because I've been here 10 years and I can tell you that this board has spent hundreds of thousands when you talk about those percentages on electoral area directors, lawsuits, legal, consultants. I would caution you as to terms of cherry picking that. When you look at financial services, corporate office expense, there's an economy of scale that happens here, that you're going to have a finance department that is spending considerable amount of time on electoral functions. So if you want to dissect and call fairness to that, I would caution you, because there's a dozen items up there, and I can assure you there's certainly some inequity over the last 20 years in terms of what EAs have benefited from and they haven't. Campbell River has spent hundreds of thousands on legal in terms of electoral area issues. I can promise you that.
Well, you definitely have a more clear vision of the historic
And
things
that's
than I do.
why when we bring this as a staff recommendation, and I've been here 10 years, I can tell you this represents fairness. I wouldn't look at this as a lens over the last 10 minutes and say EAs are paying this, that, or the other. As Mike says, these are line items, they're budgetary items. We have no idea what they'll go towards. If you look at one item and say, oh, geez, you're looking at such and such service, well, I can give you 10 examples where they haven't been. So again, I would caution you against this. In my mind, this represents fairness across the distribution.
So my follow-up to that would be, I was under the understanding that if there was consultants that were hired that were, or legal fees that were incurred specifically for an EA issue, that it would be funded through the EA admin, but
It
maybe I'm
depends what
wrong.
it is. It depends what the issue is.
Okay, well,
The Cortez issue that the board dealt with for 4 years was paid for by the board.
Okay, so another one of my comments on the policy is that I would like to see the policy outline the allocations within the general administration function, because often it is referring to something going to general administration, but I think for a more transparent way for the public and directors to understand how that function is distributed, that could be included in the policy.
The table shows how it's distributed. So if we
The
have like,
general
for example.
administration- Sorry, it says general administration, one of those top columns, and it'll say like
Yes.
40% or 60%.
Oh, sorry. Well, general administration essentially means regional. So the general administration, maybe I should have different titles on those, but consider it, that's all participants. Municipal administration is just the municipal participants. Electoral area administration is just the EA participants. And Strathcona Gardens, just area C and area D. And then to kind of highlight your other point,
Area D.
or
Campbell River.
area D in Campbell River. But to highlight your other point, for example, just like information technology, right? Campbell River pays the lion's share of general administration, so they pay the lion's share of that 70%. They also pay the lion's share of the Strathcona Gardens as well. But you know, when you look at it at the end of the day, if you just talk with our IT department, they spend about 70% of their time in the general and 30% at the Strathcona Gardens. We allocate it to the two pots, and that's just how the benefit is reflecting. And so that would be the same with with the electoral areas. And yeah, of course, if we did have a contract for the Strathcona Gardens IT, it would get expensed directly to the Strathcona Gardens IT. But when you have just the salaries, for example, for the information technology team, they just did an assessment. It's about a 70-30 split, maybe, plus or minus, but we just allocated it that way just for a fair and simple, transparent method. And then we have all these allocation percentages buried in the policy in the little black highlights there.
And I just want to make a comment on transparency. So we produced 2 budget books. One we've taken feedback from the board and the community on to produce something that's readable and I think entertainable. It's entertaining. The other is just what we're legislatively required for is a massive GL account. Every account we spend is there. That is full transparency. Anyone wants to see any line item, any account, it's in that. So you can't provide greater accountability than the GL accounts. That's what they're there for.
I'm sorry if what I said wasn't clear, because I was just thinking that in this policy, we're talking about, we have a column for general administration, which, for instance, may be 40% of a particular line item, say financial services. So within that general administration, I think that it would yes, we could expect our constituents to go to the budget and find that breakdown, but I thought it might be really helpful if it was included in here how that general administration function is divided amongst the.
We do put that split in the budget binder of the, you get 100%, again, just because it's easy, Campbell River 70%, and there's
And
the
the
split.
EAs are 27, is that correct? And
Well,
the-
they're all different, right? Then they're going to change
altogether,
every
right.
year. So that is within the budget. So anyone wants to see what the split is in general admin, that's provided in the budget.
And I have one final question or comment, and that is that the policy outlines that that there's a section of the policy says the allocation methodologies will be reviewed annually with each budget. Does the language in the policy indicate that the review will be presented to the board, or is that sort of a behind the scenes?
It's behind the scenes, if you will. So I'll give you an example. Easy one, Strathcona Gardens, major capital. We have an engineer here. Wolf, let's say 2022 would split his time maybe amongst 10 different projects, and we look at the start of the year and we say, hey, you're going to spend your time here, 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 and here. So we're going to divvy up your allocations there. We take planning, for example, we've put a lot of effort into Just Like Home. We allocated 10% of Onoco's time. So we'll internally look at those things that can't be directly allocated, and we divide those allocations where the effort's going to go. So Wolf, for example, we yanked them completely out of any of the allocation distributions through all the other services. He spends 100% of his time on, or 95% of his time on Strathcona Gardens. They are funding him. So when we say the allocations will be, distributions will be reviewed, it's those. There's no review of direct allocations. If you're charging 100%, you're billed 100%. There's just no interpretation here. We have the admin here, which are fixed numbers, and then we take the next level down, which can be planning, engineering. We look at the project. You're going to do wharves, or you're going to do surge store, and look at those year by year and just adjust the percentages. They won't make a real material difference in it, but when we speak to changing those annually, that's what we'll look at. Those will be ultimately represented in the budget. Are they highlighted? No. Do they make a real material effect? No. But they represent fairness about where people are projecting to spend their time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And my final question would be, would it make sense that the policy specifies a timeline for board review of this policy?
We have it in there, if I can, and I suggested the first calendar year after every election.
Okay, I must have missed that.
Okay, we have a speakers list still. So next is Director Von Esch and then Director Lanyon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, for folks in my community, just wondering what the percentage costs and how much they're paying. Wondering if, Mike, if you're able to just break down the general administration column there, what percentage of that is paid for by electoral areas? So, for example, general administration management, 40% of costs are to general admin. Electoral areas would pay what percentage?
Well, I think the question you're asking is general admin. That's regional. Maybe, again, we'll internalize that and change the title of it. Seems to be confusing.
No, I think I understand what you mean by general admin. I'm just wondering what percentage of that 40%.
So they're all, you got 100%, obviously, and then everything within these has the split. And then, so again, just because Campbell River is easy, 70%. So 100% of the general admin revenue, is 70% Campbell River. 111 general admin management, 40% of the costs go to general admin management. Campbell River pays 70% of those. Those percentages stay true throughout there. The amount that's put into that function varies, as you can see, but that breakdown. So, Mike, what is Cortez, for example? They 8%, 9%?
So it's 9.1, but just for clarity, every year in the budget for every single service, you can look at this year's on page 33 and 34. We put the participation rates in for every service.
So just looking, if you roll through general admin revenue, 9.1 of 100%. General admin, so again, you got 9.1 of 40, and then you're split amongst the EAs because you're going to have a different split amongst the four of you.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, just for clarity, 9.1 was Area C. My apologies. I get lumping them in everywhere. Area B was 3.7%.
So the important thing for you is the 3.7. You know, again, Les Mike says it'll change annually every year, you know, round up to 4%. Cortez will pay 4% of regional business. When that really only materially changes when you look at EA shared stuff amongst the four of you, then obviously your number will go higher. But the 4% regionally, and what is Area B for EA?
I was sort of looking more for the total of electoral areas rather than just my area.
Oh, if you look at total electoral areas, they're about 27% in total. But another way to think about too is we keep doing the total amount going to each area. If you want to think about an individual service mill rate, when you're in general administration, if you're looking at the mill rate, Cortez essentially pays 1/10. Area C would pay 1/10. Like it's divided 10 ways evenly when you actually work out the math. Then when you go to like function 130, it's essentially on a per thousand mill rate, it's going to work out to everybody paying about the same amount. That's the way the mill rate works to ensure fairness. So instead of the percentages, you can almost think about it in fractions, which no one really likes fractions. But anyway, you could talk about it, but that's how the sharing will eventually work out.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mike, and I just appreciate staff leading through this process. Obviously, this is challenging. We've had lots of heated moments around this, and just appreciate everyone being willing to have these questions answered and transparency that we're all looking for. Thank you.
Okay, going back to our speakers list, we have Director Lanyon and then Director Dahl.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to recap my understanding. So we're dealing just really specifically with how to allocate director pay. The change is we're moving standard director remuneration, of which there are 14, over to general admin because that's regional business. Electoral area director premiums will still be borne by electoral areas. And making that change causes a slight increase to the municipalities and a slight decrease in requisition to the electoral areas, but it's about $25,000 difference.
Yeah.
$7 a house for you.
Yeah, okay.
But now, just I want to throw in the caveat, that will be offset by the surplus, so there won't be any net increase.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. And so I think there was one part I didn't understand. Like this will simplify it for calculating, right?
Yes.
And then we all have our own mill rates, but basically one mill rate will apply to the general administration requisition?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, sounds good. Call to question. No, I'm just kidding.
Director Dahl?
Maybe we can go back to the slide we've been sitting on, following up on comments from the depth of our pockets at the SRD by Director Davis and comments by Director Colburn, and then questions about how the general admission percentages all work out for electoral areas. I'd like to see what the dollar figures work out for the city of Campbell River. We've had conversations where electoral areas want $1 back for every dollar they put in. And when I look at this and I see financial services, I question how much financial services is the city of Campbell River using? Corporate office space, human resources, IT. These are all things that we already pay 100% of at the City of Campbell River City Hall. So I would like it to be clear and transparent how much duplication we're paying for to support the SRD. I don't have a problem with what's being done here, and I appreciate the efforts to try to make this a little more equitable for the City of Campbell River. but showing it as a percentage doesn't really show the taxpayers of Campbell River how much we're paying to pay for duplicate services that are not actually supporting the taxpayers of Campbell River.
So if I can answer that, so with respect, there's zero duplication. So for example, we don't, HR or finance, we don't duplicate any of the services that the city does. So if we take human resources, for example, we're a human resources staff of one, Amy. 55% of her time is spent directing with Strathcona Gardens, the HR that goes with Strathcona Gardens. There's 2 participants in that. So you two split in that 55%. 20% of her time is spent on electoral area matters, so that's split on there. And then 25% of her time is spent regionally, only on regional functions, so 25 is there. So there's zero duplication in what the cities, we can't provide and they can't provide us duplicate services. So we look at the services that we do provide, so regionally, and those are the splits amongst them. So there is no duplication, I can promise you that.
Well, there is duplication if we're paying for financial services that we have in our finance department at the city of Campbell River. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not against the new policy.
No, I know, I get it. Yeah, no, it's all
But
good.
I've listened to the electoral area directors tell me that they want $1 back for every dollar they put in. But the city of Campbell River is not getting $1 back for every dollar that they put in. We've been challenged to leave the SRD by electoral areas. So I want it to be transparent how much the city of Campbell River supports the SRD and does not get equitable resources in return.
Okay, just going back to the speakers list, we have Director Coburn and then Director Lanyon.
Hi, I just had a question about that whole duplication. So because we're two different organizations, like we couldn't get financial services from the city of Campbell River, and the city of Campbell River can't get, just like we couldn't do that with our municipalities either, right? Because they're two different.
Right.
I just want to, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
I got a brief one on the
clarity.
on the financial service, for example. So the 20% for the gardens is primary payroll. It's not duplicated. Like I say, if finances got rid of that 20% and didn't do payroll, then we'd have to shift all that work over to the city of Campbell River. But like I say, City of Campbell River and the SRD are not both paying Strathcona Gardens unionized employees. We're not both paying the vendor invoices. We're not both setting budgets for Strathcona Gardens. That 30% to the Strathcona Gardens is not to support Campbell River per se, it's to support the Strathcona Gardens operations. Of that 30%, once the lump sum goes over there, Campbell River does fund about 86% of it. That's based on the assessment, but again, to refer to Dave's point, we're not duplicating everything for the general administration. We're paying, that cost goes to pay Connected Coast invoices. It goes to pay the regional housing service, just to receive the basic input grant over in the electoral area administration. That 40%. Well, we're doing community works funds is a lot of administration. We're paying bills, hydro bills for street lighting. Everything else. So, the work itself is not being duplicated. There's just, like I say, a cost to, staff and pay people at Strathcona Gardens. Currently, the SRD is providing those services. We have an allocation coming out of Human Resources and IT to perform those functions. If that's making sense.
I'm not talking about Strathcona Gardens. I'm completely fine with that column. I'm talking about the general administration, and I know that there's money being paid for several of those points there. At the last budget, it was called unallocated funds, which we reduced by $500,000, but still left $1.1 million in unallocated funds that the city of Campbell River is paying for. I want it to be recognized publicly so the taxpayers of Campbell River understand what unallocated funds means and how they're not getting $1 back for every dollar that they put in, but are being asked to supply $1 back for every dollar being put in. And I think making it public is at least makes it fair to the taxpayers.
Director Lanyon.
Thanks. I think I gather what Director Dahl is saying, which is that Campbell River is self-sufficient on its own, but it participates in the SRD to benefit the region, which in turn has some future payback to the city of Campbell River. Yeah. Does that sum it up?
I don't know if that sums up what Director Dahl is saying, but you're 100% correct. Again, I've said it, I can't answer the value. Like, I can't answer your question, like, to what dollar for dollar in. But what Director Lanyon has said, the benefit and why, I keep saying it, the benefit to the municipalities is only regionally. Like you are self-sufficient. So when you're here, the benefit to you can only be regionally. Like, because we can't go provide your planning service or anything else. We can do contract services like we do fire admin, we used to do IT, we can do that. But your benefit is indirect because it's regional 100%. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, we have Director Wally and then Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that in general administration, that is for regional benefit. Every taxpayer, doesn't matter if you live in Sayward or Campbell River, pays exactly the same mill rate. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Okay, on the question of, Director Sinnott.
Yes, thank you. I would think I was acknowledged before the question was called. I think what Director Dahl is trying to say is Campbell River is very interested in supporting the area regionally. We see the indirect benefits to the city, but that means we want to make sure everyone understands that if we don't get regional services, then it creates tension, because that's exactly what we want to help us justify the kind of money that we're pouring into this area to get regional services back. So if you look at the cost of the corporate space, which is 60%, which I assume we're paying 70% of, that means we're paying 42% of this space, that we want to see regional services. So when we have our next item, remember that. We want regional services.
So while it's on top of mind, I hope this Director Lanyon and Director Sinnott are 100% correct on that, and I'm hopeful that represents what Director Dahl's thoughts were, because those are true points.
Okay, Director Von Esch.
Thank you. I think Director Dahl, I think it is important to note that Campbell River has, like 15,500 property folios. When you each of those portfolios gets charged $1, you're raising $15,000. On Cortez, we have 876 properties. $1 raises $876. So Campbell River is always going to pay the lion's share for it when you look at the total sum, and I think that's important to look at and recognize. I also think it's important to look at it on a population and a property.
Opposed? Carried.
Chair, I'd like to move option A. I'd like to move option A, that the draft corporate administration support allocation policy be recommended to the regional board for further consideration at this time.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Option A. Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries.
Short
Thank you,
recess.
What's that? Okay, let's take a short recess. 10 minutes. So the next item on our agenda is the transportation study.
Excuse me, Chair, regional transportation study?
I said transportation study, didn't I?
I'm just teasing you.
Okay, the regional transportation study. And we'll bring it to staff for,
After we vote on receipt.
yeah, so. Receipt.
Second.
Seconded by,
Thank you, Mr.
Chair
Chair.
Baker.
So we have, Meredith has a presentation for us in terms of what we've been able to find, what options, next steps, the options we've been exploring, and then happy to have a conversation afterwards to look at next steps, possible next steps.
Looks like the presentation's just coming up, so. Sorry, do you have a? Thank you. No worries. So very, very excited to bring this forward finally. We've been talking about this for a long time, as I'm sure you know. So the Village of Tassus really brought this forward in 2019 in their own studies, where they found that transportation in Tassus was the highest marker of dissatisfaction among residents of that community. So that really spurred Tassus to do a lot of transportation planning and study, and that triggered the need for a regional service. So we started looking at this in about 2023, and that's gone through a few iterations, and that's why we're here today. And of course, this does come out of a regional need and a regional interest. It's been expressed by many at the table. Susan's in it today. But certainly aligns with the regional district's strategic priorities. The vision, of course, to create a connected, resilient, and self-sufficient region, as well as the benefits of community well-being, climate resiliency, and good governance. So this is just an overview of the current network as it exists. What you'll see here in the pink there is the Island Link bus. That's their existing service to the North Island. And in orange, kind of hard to tell the difference, but the age-friendly van out of the village of Sayward, which also currently provides some regular scheduled service. And so you can see Fair Harbor, Uclugie, Zabalas, Ahatas, and Tassus currently not, and Gold River as well, not served by any sort of existing public transportation service. What isn't shown here is that there are a lot of charter or door-to-door services for the purposes of medical appointments and other things that are existing services in those areas. We will talk a little bit more about those existing services later, but they are just not shown in that they are not a scheduled service that's available to all residents. So building off this, the first link that we can most easily add once we had a service in place to fund it would be to Gold River and Texana. That is largely due to the paved road that serves that community. As we've gone through this research, it's really the Forest Service roads are a significant barrier in that both Island Link and BC Transit will not provide service on a Forest Service road. So following an extension of the Island Link service to Gold River, we would be looking to connect a shuttle or other type of service from Tassus to Gold River. And of course, then we're also looking for a connecting service that could go from Fair Harbor and Zabalas out to the existing Island Link connection at the Lost Junction. So this would be kind of the full build out of what we're talking about right now. And then conceptually, like this. And then, of course, beyond the actual service, there are some supportive actions or sort of soft actions that we could take. These are things that the SRD could do now immediately without a transportation service for little to no cost. That is that we can promote those existing medical transport service options that are currently provided by VHA and FNHA, as well as the Sayward Age-Friendly Van. Also the Better at Home program that provides supportive service for seniors. As well, we can start talking about the future of regional transportation for the SRD. This is one of those things that we really need to start the conversation if we will have any sort of regional service in the next 10 years. BC Transit has indicated that if we were to, with the City of Campbell River, to expand the Campbell River transit system to the rest of the region, that process of expansion would take about 5 years. So we really need to start that conversation now. If we are not talking about expanding the City of Campbell River service and instead are proposing a new Strathcona Regional District service, that process to establish would be about 10 years. So again, starting that conversation now is really, really key. So I won't go through all of this table. It's provided in your report. This gives kind of the overview of all of the different ways that we could implement a transportation service. In the more simplified way to say it is that immediately we can advertise existing services through our website and other forms. So that again is those medical appointment services from VHA or FNHA, the Sayward Age-Friendly Bus, Better at Home. We can also build off initial conversations with BC Transit to investigate that potential expanded service, again, either as an expansion of the existing Campbell River service or as a standalone Strathcona Regional District service that would be separate. We can also initiate discussions with potential service partners in Tassos and Zeballos. We have talked to a number of different community partners or potential community partners and First Nations in the area, and there is interest. But each community organization has different needs or different challenges with becoming a service partner. So that would also really depend on what we're able to offer as a means of support. Also, we can start looking into establishing a regional transportation service. This is how we would establish the requisition to pay for operating of a transit network. So that's really essential before we can initiate any of the implementation options, which are the longer term options. So with an established service where we could requisition funds to pay for these services, we could continue the conversation with Island Link to initiate that initial extension to Gold River. They have provided us an estimate of $26,000 in operating costs to start operating that connection. That would be 4 one-way, or actually 4 round-trip trips, so 4 days, 1 trip each day between Gold River and Campbell River. That cost is not their full cost, but what that is for them is a way to expand their service coverage into a new market, but also they would be seeking the revenues that they would generate from that. And so that's where that comes from. Beyond that, we would be looking at either procuring 1 or 2 passenger vans to support potential service operator partners in Tassos and Zeballos. The cost of 1 passenger van, imagining a Sprinter van, something of that nature, is about $90,000. That's new. And so looking at that as a capital expense of $90,000 to $180,000. Again, if there were an existing van that were available to support this service, that capital may not be required. But again, it would depend on what service provider was discovered. Beyond the provision of the van for capital, we would potentially also, or instead of, provide operating funds to support. We've received an estimate that would be about $140,000 in operating expenses. That again would vary depending on the type of service that was agreed upon and what service provider was identified. So lastly, speaking of the different types of funding that could support this process, grant funding is available to support capital purchases, but not operating funds. So that's why this is potential grant funding for capital. The Growing Communities Fund, Regional Transportation allocates. There's $300,000 currently available to use for this in that. And the current Community Works Fund also has existing funds available under each electoral area. Other grant funds that have existed historically are the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and the Zero Emission Transit Fund. Those are all currently not open, but we would anticipate that they will likely have a future intake. So beyond those, we would really need a transportation service established in order to provide operating funds for a sustainable service. Thank you.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, so what we're, I think, practically suggesting as options to if the board is interested in furthering transportation, is the easiest low-hanging fruit, if we're going to physically provide something, is to partner with Island Link, and they can connect Campbell River to Gold River 4 days a week with a $26,000 a year subsidy for that. So that's going to move people from Campbell River and Gold River back and forth, residents and tourists 4 days a week, for annually $26,000. Seems fairly reasonable. And then, you know, if we created a service, look, there's an operator out there. We're not investing in anything. We create a service, we requisition a few funds, and we support the subsidy for the private operator out there. And if it works, it's great. Let's say it doesn't, ridership wasn't there, it was impractical, the costs don't work out. We're not really have a big ball of wool here to unwind here. It's just we're providing funding to an existing operator. So I think we're suggesting, if looking at transportation, that could be one way to move forward in moving people again to the center of Campbell River, getting them from our rural communities. Another option there is, because there's a bus that's provided, or a van provided from Sayward. Island Link obviously goes up and down the highway. They fund a van there through the village themselves, about $6,000 or $7,000 a year. We have some capital money within the Growing Communities Fund. We could look at buying a van there and shuttling folks back and forth between the village and the junction at Sayward, so we could link up with Island Link. And I think operating costs of that would be fairly low. Let's say we looked at the same thing 3 or 4 days a week. You're going from the village just to the junction there. I think we could do that pretty reasonably, and then look at getting folks from Gold River into Campbell, Sayward to Campbell on a regular basis, and then continue to explore some of the further challenges. And I hope Director Davis has some input here, as there might be some opportunity, as we have some funds for capital and we have a way to get a transportation system to Gold River. If there is something that the board directs us to explore further with Tassus to Gold River, we're trying to shrink this thing down into bite-sized bits here that are consumable, and it might be more available to find a way to get back and forth from Tassus to Gold River. So I think we're curious to hear from Director Davis. We've heard some things maybe with the Muchelet First Nation possibly, that there's been some activity, and the village has done some work, but we're not certain on that.
So Director Davis, you're up on the next speaker's list. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much for that report, and I'm glad to see this finally coming up for us to reflect on once again. There's definitely some potentials here. I'm wondering if there's other ways of making it more affordable by linking it into shipping, like something that could potentially generate some income around this. In terms of Tassus and our needs, I think realistically what we're looking at is once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, so that there's not a lot of cost involved with that, but then balancing it against the potential for some economic uses of it. I'm just spitballing ideas here, but there's other things going on. Like if there was economic potentials for things like a shuttle service or tourism, like we're opening up this Grease Trail, and one of the things we'd be looking at is having a way for people to get back from the other end of Wass Lake back around to Tassus if they do the trail and the canoe route, which is what's currently under development. it's certainly going to have benefit for other communities if it's extended to it, like they're underserved. And when I say underserved, that's probably 4,000 people if you're really talking about Cayuga, Zabalas, Sakana, Gold River, Tassus. Like, there are varying levels of service, but anything we can do to link to these services that are already going on at the moment would be really helpful. I'm just spitballing here and trying to figure out some creative solutions for this so it doesn't cost too much money. But it's good to hear that under GCF that we have some money available. So yeah, I'm also interested in hearing what the other communities, and particularly the underserved communities, have to say about this. Thanks.
Well, if I can, just to comment on that, I think if we're going to get off and running with this, I think piggybacking on Island Link is our goal here, is that they're a commercial operator. They're bringing people in the Campbell River, and how we can connect with them. So when, we have explored everything here with commercial operators, VHA, First Nations, and I think we need to simplify it in terms of when we look at commercial transportation. From what we've explored and the time we've spent on it, if we're looking at Tassus, like we have an understanding with Island Link about the cost to go back and forth. $26,000 seems quite reasonable, 4 trips a week to Gold River and to Campbell River back and forth. So at Tassus, we'd be looking at something, if the board gives us direction, to focus on back and forth to Gold River and to be connecting with Island Link. So Island Link isn't going to do any kind of shipping or commercial business other than transporting people back and forth. So I would suggest we focus on trying to make these connections with Island Link and then building upon that. Because let's say the Gold River to Campbell River and the board supported, we created a service, and we said, okay, go out to Gold River 4 days a week, see what kind of the ridership, the uptake is on that, because Tassus to Campbell would be dependent on the success of Gold River to Campbell, because you're going to need that, to get from Gold River to Campbell River. So I'd suggest focusing on how we can connect with Island Link. And for example, the Sayward, if you envision, we have funding, let's say, to buy 2 or 3 passenger vans for this. If we bought a passenger van for Sayward, and it's under 10 kilometers back and forth to the junction, and it connects with Island Link. If Island Link is going to go 4 days a week to Gold River, let's just say I think the village pays about $6,000 a year. Let's call it $10,000 a year from Sayward to the junction. That's a pretty low risk, pretty low investment to get folks on a regular schedule, say 4 days a week from Sayward into Campbell River and connect with Island Link. I think those are doable. They're also not complicated in terms if there's not success. We're just providing support fundings to a commercial operator that, we could easily back out of if they weren't successful. So I think what we're suggesting here, even though we didn't have any recommendations, is that, explore further Gold River to Campbell, Sayward to the junction, and then further exploration on Tassus to Gold and maybe Fair Harbor to Wasp, because practically when we talk to Island Link is that they're happy to stop at Wasp, but we got to get folks to Wasp. So that's kind of the line of sight that we're trying to provide in terms of getting off the schneid for transportation.
Okay, my only comment following up on that is frequency of service, because the greater frequency of service you offer, I believe the less uptake you're going to get. So you have to find that sweet spot, that balance where it actually creates a viable service.
So I think, Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong, but Island Link, did they suggest the 4 days? So they're the transportation experts, not us. So they felt 4 days a week was a good interval. So that's where we got that. So I don't know if that's contradictory to what you're saying, but that number came from them.
That number certainly did come from Island Link, and it was intended as a number for Gold River. So the frequency from Tassus may not may not be the same need. That would be something we would explore. And if I may just add to some of the options I didn't mention earlier, but the Moshit First Nation has recently purchased a van and is providing shuttle service for their tourism operations between Gold River and the reserve there. So that would be a potential partner. And they're currently running a survey to explore the possibility of running that van to Tassus as well. So that would be one option that we haven't explored yet, given that it is fresh. Thanks.
If I could follow up on that, we recently did receive that survey in Tassus, and people have been filling it out and sending it back. And I think they're going to have problems with the economic viability of what they're doing, but by expanding it to Tassus, that certainly would increase that.
Okay, we have a speakers list already. We have Director Wally and then Director Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of using our growing community funds and buying vans outright for Tassus, Abalos, and Sayward. And these people are coming in on their own, so it shouldn't be too hard to find a driver who's going to drive anyway. He could drive the van in, and then the village would own it and maintain it, put a little insurance on it. The Sayward one is going to be pretty reasonable. I think now, if I'm not wrong, it runs all the way to Campbell River, where if it's only going to the junction, that would be quite a cost savings on that too. So that's my thoughts on it. As far as Island Link, $26,000 to support that, I don't really have a problem with that. That's not very much money. If 4 days a week doesn't get the ridership that's required, I mean, that's negotiable. They could make it 2 days a week or whatever would work. And that would probably cost even less. They're very conservative.
Okay, we have Director Rice and Director Dahl.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments that I would throw out there. First of all, there was an interesting article in one of the newspapers. I can't remember if it was the Mirror. But anyways, it was related to VHA and the fact that in WAS, there isn't reliable transportation to get people to medical appointments in Victoria. So they actually use a taxi service that gets dispatched from Nanaimo, and they drive all the way to WAS. And then, anyways, it's a flat rate, and VHA is trying to say that they have budget for this. So that's something to perhaps maybe think in the big plan, that it would be nice if we had that reliable service where we could point back to VHA on that. The other thing that I want to mention with BC Transit is that when I take a look at what Area D is paying right now for our shared transit plan, it's not that I'm disappointed with the amount that we pay, but we pay enough. It's $275,000 a year. And I'm confused with what is the Campbell River Master Transportation Plan, because I sat at a meeting on Monday with business owners both in Area D and Area C, where one of their biggest complaints was the fact that here we have BC Transit and the bus schedule is set up in such a way that we can't even move people to get to work jobs early in the morning, like a 7 o'clock start and those kinds of things. So again, it would be nice if we were going to do a regional service. Is there any way that we would have a regional transportation plan that would provide some input in the fact that we have BC Transit working in Campbell River, we have BC Transit working in Area D, and then all the way to Comox and Courtenay. But where's the collaboration with BC Transit? I struggle with that. So that's one of my concerns with that, and I'm wondering who drives the recommendations with BC Transit? So if you are going to partner with BC Transit, how do you get BC Transit to sit at the table and actually listen to, each of the individual concerns in terms of what is going to be the scheduling? Because at the end of the day, it's our taxpayers that are paying this, and yet we don't seem to have that input into it. The other thing that I thought was quite interesting with the Island Link is that one of the things that was discussed Monday at the round table is that over the last few years, we've seemed to forgotten about parks and rides, which sounds like that is what would be required from TAS, is where, we would have a place where we would meet, we would drop off our vehicles, and then we jump on something that moves people. The other thing that I want to talk about too, in terms of transportation, if we were going to look at this as a regional service, is that it's one thing to get people to Campbell River, but how do we get them beyond Campbell River? A lot of these people are coming for a reason, either be medical or any of those things. And yet, again, once we get to Campbell River with the bus scheduling that we have, there seems to be challenges with that. I had a constituent reach out to me and go, how come I can't get a transportation service from Area D to Nanaimo because I'm in a wheelchair? And there doesn't seem to be any transportation for that either. So there's a lot of things I think that we could look at with a regional service that might pull some of this a little bit more, at least have some continuity between regional districts. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, we have Director Dahl and then Director Mawhinney.
As far as BC Transit, for Director Rice, I would say you should get together with the city and we can try to talk to them, but we've talked to them at the last 3 AVICCs, and they've promised that they're going to get together with us and look at routes, because there's neighborhoods that are over 10 years old that are not serviced at all by transit. And Hamelco, we've been trying to get service for them, and now we're working on trying to get service to the airport. So far, we haven't accomplished anything. So
good to know, and I would love to be part of those conversations. Thank you.
And one option that I thought of now that would not work with Island Link, but there is a service provider in Campbell River that used to shuttle people back and forth to the NVI mine, and he's been sitting since December of 2023, but he's got Sprinter type vans that I think would be appropriate for that type of a service and may be worth speaking to. I know I was in a meeting not too long ago, but I forgot my book to get my notes, and they talked about specific things like needing to get groceries to places like Tassus and Zavelis. I think that if you were using a service like the guy that's not been running, that you probably could move some groceries into these remote locations to generate some revenue, to make them a little bit self-sustaining. So that was just my thoughts. I don't know if it's worth talking to, but I know Fred's got 2 or 3 vans that are sitting not doing anything for the last couple of years.
Thank you.
No, it's absolutely worth talking to, and it's, I think our kind of question here is, do you want us to explore a little depth of what we've got? And I think it starts with Gold to Campbell and Sayward to Campbell. I think it's very little risk, very little investment. We're partnering with a third party, whether it's Island Link or this individual. We're certainly not suggesting, we're going to be bus drivers and buying buses and all this stuff. We're looking at ways to piggyback on services or service providers and provide, reasonable resources to get that done. And it looks like Gold and Sayward through that, and possibly this other person is away and trying to get direction. I want to comment on what Director Rice said about Island Health and some of the work that we've been trying to do with them is that, yeah, they will provide a door-to-door service, and we've approached them with, hey, we can partner and create some real economy here, because you're going to people's houses in Wasp, North Island, Port McNeill, and driving them to Campbell and Nanaimo, and they absolutely won't. It's door-to-door service. It's to their house, to their hospital, no other passengers. It's incredibly inefficient, and they're not interested in any partnerships, which is a total waste because, there's a lot. We've heard some real horror stories about the cost to transport people. And, I fear if the word gets out on that, everyone making a medical appointment that's in North Island, I mean, you're going to make a doctor's appointment in Campbell River and they're going to tax you back and forth. It just, wow. So, so there was other opportunities, but it's this, there always seemed to be a little bit of a complication, and we didn't know whether the board wanted us to pursue these four without getting too deep into it. But again, I think the Gold River and Sayward is a good start, and we can continue looking at Tassus and Zabalas, Fair Harbor to Was if that's the direction the board wants us to explore.
Okay, we have a speakers list. We have next, okay, on the list, Director Mawhinney, Director Von Asch. Let me finish. Thanks. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. So we have Director Mawhinney, Director Von Asch, Director Colburn, and Director Sinnott. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for the report and all the work and thought that's gone into this. I have a couple of questions, and one of them is, as I would be interested to hear from the mayor from Gold River, because this seems like we're really considering that this is a possible, benefit to their community. And I wasn't, I haven't heard if there is a community interest. Like, we've heard from Director Davis over the years about the concern and appetite for such a service to support Tassus, and I wasn't sure if there was the same sort of interest or appetite from the village of Gold River. And one of my questions about that is that in the report on page 5, it talks about the connecting Gold River and Campbell River, and under the notes section, it says that such a thing would enable one-day round-trip travel from Campbell River to Gold River and back. But the next note says one-day round-trip travel is not available for trips originating in Gold River. Is that what is meant currently, or is that what would be in the future if this was to be set up? Because if you can't have a one-day return trip from Gold River to Campbell River and back, then it sort of necessitates people spending the night in Campbell River and waiting possibly more than one day if there's only a 4-day-a-week service. So I was just, could maybe staff speak to that?
Sure. So yes, as it's written there is what Island Link is proposing, in the sense that their fleet is in Campbell River. So as they've currently priced it for us, is that they would be able to provide service from Gold River from Campbell River to Gold River and back to Campbell River, which is facilitating, of course, one type of travel there. To have that service start in Gold River is certainly possible, but it just means that they would then have to have a driver go to Gold River from Campbell River, load up, go back to Campbell River, back to Gold River, and then back to Campbell River. So it is a different cost, for sure. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but again, the cost provided was based on the other model.
Right. And so I think I would be really interested to hear from Director Lott if that was of interest to, or, if that met a community need, being able to get out of Gold River and make connections beyond Gold River, like you're saying that Island Link can connect to Courtenay or Nanaimo or further. But I would imagine that a lot of people would be wanting to go to town, if we can call Campbell River town, and do errands and buy supplies and then return home. So that was just, I would be curious about that.
Just to note, then, of course, they would be able to make a one-day or a one-way trip to Campbell River for connections if they're trying to go to Victoria or Nanaimo or something.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And regarding the Growing Communities Fund, I believe we earmarked $300,000 for this. From a process perspective or like a legal perspective, can we buy the vans and give them to the municipalities that we're discussing as this is part of the discussion, or would they does the regional district need to retain ownership of them because the funds are coming from the Growing Community Fund that was assigned to the regional district.
I'm not at this point 100% sure, but we'd figure something out, whether it was a lease agreement for it, or we buy it, or we can buy it, give it to them. I don't know 100% now, but I'm sure there's a way we can work around that.
Okay, we have, so on the speakers list, Director Von Esch, Director Colburn, and then Director Senate. Anyone else? No? Okay.
I'd love to hear from Julie before I speak, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, Director Colburn, Director Von Esch says he wants you to go first.
Thank you. I'm extremely thankful for this report, and I'm also very conscious of when the CAO said, you know, trying to take this large geographic area and put it into some bite-sized pieces for us. So thankful for that. I am curious about connections beyond as well. So, you know, in the area up here, Fair Harbor, Wass, Oakleigh, we go to Campbell River, but then for, you know, things that are points beyond, right? Costco is in Campbell River. And so if we're doing this for ridership alone, I also wonder about how to get the things that we're buying back here, right? So, for example, I know it just raises so many more questions for me, and so I'm thankful for the starting piece, because we have, you know, there used to be a cab company here that would do trips to town. There's has a bus, you know, that'll do, but that's, you know, they do that for their membership alone, and then there's 2 families with 3 kids. And then once you go to Costco and Walmart and Superstore, then you have all of this stuff to bring back with you, right? So along with that bite-sized pieces comment, kind of divvying it up into like shopping, health appointments, and visitors and tourism. And then when you've got visitors and tourism, quite often they are going to points beyond as well. So they've got a 7-day trip planned, and they go to, you know, Campbell, they fly into Campbell River, and they come up here, and then they go into Mount Waddington, and then they want to come. So it just raises more questions for me. And I would also be interested about the, you know, any kind of plans to do surveying and how to reach as many people in the population as we can in these areas, especially the Tassis section and the Eagle River section and that Portman, you know, about what the value of that is to them, and what they consider their ridership, and what those kind of first of all, what the mechanisms would be to get that information from people, from locals, because of course we can't do that for any visitors. And, you know, if they have any idea about how many trips that would take to not saturate, but to augment what was already going on. Yeah, so it brings so many questions up for me. I also, you know, am conscious about people that, you know, do trips to town, and they charge $250 for a trip to town. And that's how they're augmenting their gas to make it feasible for themselves to go and to make all these stops for people. And so it's just, I appreciate this first report, and the taking the smaller pieces and giving those each out as options and something that we can work off of, or else get more information on. So thank you.
Great. Director Von Esch.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking of Cortez Island here. We're grateful there's been a new shuttle service that crosses Quadra Island for folks that aren't driving, and it also goes to the airport, which I've recently used, a great service. And Cortez, you know, if the average person makes a trip a month, they're already paying $50 a trip for a car and a driver. I'm wondering, do we need to? And I recognize the need here. Like, this is great for these small communities, and I'm wondering, you know, I would like to see us spend that $300,000. You know, let's get that spent and see what we can do for transportation to support these communities. As far as a regional transportation service, my understanding this conversation was initially looking at a West Coast or a sub-regional service, which I would certainly support, and wondering if that's a possibility as well.
I think anything's possible. We're just trying to report back and go, like, we're trying to link and connect and partner to come up with something that's the most efficient and cost effective, because the reason you don't have commercial operators going to these areas is because of cost, right? And then you find out things like VHA is spending tons of money to go get folks, and then, you know, we're finding other services and people going to do groceries, this, that, and the other. So, you know, we're trying to explore anything that's possible. And, you know, consumable, right? Like, we're not going to bring something back and says, oh, well, it's going to be $1 million for this, right? Try to be super creative. Work with the nations, work with private operators. We're hearing tourism, we're hearing shopping, we're hearing return trips. So, you know, we've got some input here, certainly. And yes, I'm going to say years ago, I guess now, the motion was West Coast. But if, you know, if the board wants us to explore integrating Quadra and Cortez, you know, we're happy to do that.
But right now, we're looking at a sub-regional service? Is that what you're
I
thinking?
mean, the motion was West Coast that excluded, I mean, this motion came, I think, even before this board, but the motion was excluding areas B and C.
Thanks.
Okay, going back to our speakers list, we have Director Sinnott and then Director Lott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I paid for my ChatGPT subscription a couple months ago, so it's very handy to look and ask it, where do they do this in other places of the world, like Alaska, Scandinavia, parts of Northern Canada, of course, Australia, and what kind of service options they come out with, and then throw in our current report and sort of suggest exactly what you did, which is create a backbone using the existing Island Link service, and then create the feeder routes using innovative community-based options and trials. So at everything from not-for-profits, faith groups, even your bulletin board with a rideshare pilot. So things like that that can work within each community, that suits each community, work with the First Nations. So I'm very in favor of investigating, you know, and maybe doing test pilots for various types of options. The one thing that you haven't mentioned, which was brought up, was also supplementing float plane service. Because there's people that either through weather or helicopter service, weather or other reasons, it may need some help getting in and out to the connector hubs, so Gold River. And if, as I recall, the road into Gold River does take you to the float plane center that's paved. And I think that's Island Link's issue, right? They can't be on the gravel roads. So we're dealing with how do we connect the gravel served communities to the pickup centers and then on. And I'm also hearing that there's an issue with moving great amounts of food and supplies in. So again, the suggestion was there's various different things that are being used all over the world. But one is just basically repurposing a specific share service, either for an individual that's going to town, or repurposing things like school buses and other things to do big cargo loads in and out. That might be an option if if Island Link is overwhelmed, they just can't find the room for the food orders and things like that. That's a different thing that we're going to have to deal with. And hopefully we can leverage our health people and our First Nations health authorities to partner with us in sort of the model that we can work. If they have those kind of bucks, what was it, $2,100 in taxi fees for one person? Maybe they can slip some money our way and then we can get them the rest of the way. Thanks.
Yeah, that was our hope, but they seem fairly rigid there in running an incredibly inefficient service. So
the Premier just sort of suggested they need to open their minds a little. We'll encourage it.
Okay, Director Lott, you have your hand up. You're next.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Mike. Yeah, you're still muted. Can't hear you.
Let's try again.
Okay, there you go.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think this would be a very welcome proposal for the citizens of Gold River to have an opportunity to tie into a company like Island Link that's well established. I believe they're about a 25-year old company on Vancouver Island. They have transportation network all through the island, and that would allow people to get back and forth to Campbell River because our population is older and it's more challenging for them to get back and forth. And we consume many of the services that Campbell River offers because we consider ourselves more like basically a bedroom community of Campbell River. So this would be very welcome by our citizens. 4 times a week would be great. The cost seems very nominal. I would think that if there was some modification, they would be much more open to the idea of having the service start in Gold River, go to Campbell and come back, because a lot of the trips that they take for whatever services they're consuming outside of Gold River will probably be day trips. But when I look at the carrier and the concept and the cost and what could be offered, I think that the citizens of Gold River would really welcome this, and it would help with the again promoting the SRD and that whole idea of us providing regional services, because it certainly would be a welcome one. And so I support it. With the modification that I'd like to see the service start in Gold River, go to Campbell and come back, so that would accommodate probably more of the ridership that's I think we'd be more interested in just day trips out. But I think it's a great initiative, and it'd be well received by our community.
Director
Thank
Davis.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Lott. Director Davis, you're next.
Yeah, just hearing this conversation and this possibility of purchase or access to a couple of vans for the more distant regions, maybe it would make sense to have a van for Tassos and then one for the Zabalos area that run in and connect with other services that are either existing or could be offered. That might be a way to make that work, because I don't want to be advocating for this for years and years and then find us shut out of it, based on other economic imperatives. At the end of this conversation, I do have a motion that I can drop in the chat too. Thanks.
Okay, I have a few questions, but before I do anything, anybody else? Director Baker.
Barker. Okay, I've been called that for a while. I just would like to say I think it's a great initiative. I think working together with Sayward and our age-friendly van and having the whole link to Island Link and up and down the island is a perfect solution for us small communities. I think it'll be affordable. I think you're going to get good usage from them. I can speak for Sayward, I believe, to doctor's appointments. So I greatly appreciate this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone online? No. The only questions I have is the communities that are serviced by gravel logging road, service road. That's the challenge. And I was just wondering if the operators of the UChuck would be interested in helping out. Now, that's not going to be one day in, one day out, but there are probably a lot of people who are going out, they're out for a couple of days and then they're coming back. So if we had a 4-day service from Gold River, if we could collect people on Zabalos and Tassos on the UChuck, bring them into Gold River, they can link up to the bus and in they go, and then reverse that process when they come out. So if there are a lot of groceries, the UChuck could be able to handle that. So I think that's an option. We might want to ask if they could, what they could accommodate, what their suggestions are. And they used to do that years ago. So I don't, kind of like going back to the yesteryear, but darn it, it worked. Okay, so we have on the floor a motion to receive. Anybody?
Is that hand new or?
Oh. Director Coburn, do you want to say something more?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up. And the reason being is because with the downturn with the downturn of some of the logging up here and the fish farms, things like that, it may be a way to inadvertently bring an economic boost to someone who has provided a service in the past that could increase their ridership to do that again. You check in here twice a year, once in June, once in September. So to increase that would be amazing. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. So we're on receipt. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Director Davis, you said you wanted to. Oh, was it Director Lott or Director Davis?
Director Davies said the motion.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I just put a motion into chat.
Okay.
It's a bit wordy, but there it is.
To advertise existing transportation services in the SRD, to create an SRD transportation service, initiate discussions with BC Transit, Island Link, VHA, and other current transportation providers within the region to strategize future BC Transit options for this region, including potential purchase or access of vans for unserviced areas such as Zabalas, Cayucit, and Tassus. That cover it, Director Davis?
Well, that's what I wrote.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Davis. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Director Weiss seconds it. Okay, let's discuss the motion then. With that, okay, Director Sinnott.
Yeah, we had a brief sort of question from Area B and C, whether they be included. Is this going to be brought back to us to decide the scope of the transportation service and some options?
Yes.
Isn't there a separate transportation issue going on for the islands that they did on their own?
Well, I think there's a few things happening over there.
Director Von Esch?
Thank you, Chair. Director Davis, wondering just if you're open to a friendly amendment and just adjust that to create an SRD transportation sub-regional service.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If someone would be willing to second that.
I will.
Okay, it's been amendment by Director Von Esch, seconded by Director Mulwini. Discussion. And we have Director Sinnott and Director Dahl.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against that amendment. I would prefer we keep all options on the table at this point. I think there's a lot of concern that I would have that we don't include B and C potentially in the future and just start down an exclusionary path.
Okay, Director Dahl.
Well, I was going to ask why we don't just add B and C to the list as Zabalas, Cayucit, and Tassus. Why would we be wanting to have two separate systems? Why wouldn't we not want to have one that does everything rather than?
Yeah, I interpret that as such as, because, I mean, we're obviously talking about Gold River here as well, so, and Sayward wasn't on there, so the service said SRD Transportation, so now we have, is it going to be SRD Transportation or sub-transportation? Because for me, the Zabalas, Cayucit, Tassus, at the end of it doesn't mean anything. It's either we have a transportation service we're exploring for the whole SRD or a portion of it.
Director Mulwini.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the really the core of this report is around West Coast transportation, and as well, I can tell you that today when I was walking on the ferry, there was a van there that was waiting to pick people up off the ferry and transport them across Quadra to the Harriet Bay to catch the Cortez ferry. So there are already solutions that are occurring currently on Quadra. And I just think that as the report really is focused on these bite-sized pieces and talking about getting to Gold River and potentially from Gold River out to Tassus or what have you, that, you know, in the future, if it looks like an expansion of the service would be beneficial to all of the areas, then I think that we should look at it at that time. Thanks.
Director Colburn and then Director Kerr. And then
Hi.
Director Rice.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I won't be voting for the amendment. I think that, you know, we've had a really good discussion here. We've got questions about, you know, making sure that like connections fit and things like that. You know, we've talked about tourism. We've talked about citizens and how they go and how they move and how they work and connecting from Sabalis to Gold River. And I think leaving anybody out of this conversation at this preliminary point is not a good idea. So that's why I won't be voting for the amendment.
Okay, we have Director Kerr and then Director Von Esch.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a pretty robust conversation from all areas of the regional district on this issue. I was just looking at the report, and under alternatives, there was two options. And just looking at option A, I think without getting specific like the motion that's on the floor, I think it pushes it back to staff after listening to this conversation to bring back a further report with more detail. So I won't be voting for the motion or the amendment. I prefer to have option A.
Okay, Director Von Esch and then Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would support Director Kerr on this one. And just to answer your question, Director Dahl, I think the reason for Cortez anyway, he's wanting to be out is that we've got a shuttle across Quadra, we've got a van on Cortez that picks people up and brings people to town, and we're already paying sort of a premium cost for our ferries. So those are kind of the reasons for me. Thank you.
Director Rice and then Director Wally.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I won't be supporting this amended motion either.
Director Wally.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I like Director Kerr's idea there. I'm going to vote against both of these, and then hopefully Director Kerr will make a motion.
Yes, that's the first one. Anybody else? Okay.
I'm happy to withdraw my motion and just support Director Kerr's motion.
Okay. Well, let's just vote on it. Get it done. So the amendment to the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Opposed, it fails. Now the motion in its original state unamended. Anybody in favor? Opposed? Okay, that fails. So Director Kerr, you had maybe a motion?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to move option 1, that a further report to examine potential operation models and service partnerships based on service level be prepared. That dash, I'm not sure what that dash stands for. So, be prepared for the board's consideration.
Okay, Director Wally seconds it. Thank you, Director Kerr, for your motion. Any further discussion? Director Colburn?
Where is that in the report? I'm just not, there was alternatives, but there was not.
I think option A is what Director Kerr just.
So that's 3A?
Perfect. Is that all that is? 3A. I just don't see the wording of that anywhere in the report. Just tell me what page and where to find that. Thanks.
I'm at page 3, under the word alternatives, option 1 at the very bottom. Is that correct?
Yeah, page 3.
Oh, page 9.
Yeah,
So again,
try page 9.
this is alternative 3.
This is the 2021 report, sorry.
So, Director Curry, you want to restate your motion? It was right there. Oh, okay, it's on.
Mine is from 2021 or 2023 or something.
There you go.
Yeah, so
Right
that's
there.
what's confusing for me.
Okay. So the motion is that the further report to examine potential operational models and service partnerships be based on service level 1 be prepared for the board's consideration. So is that?
That's from an old report.
That's an old, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh, it's still work. I mean, we want,
Yeah, we want to further report.
yeah, we want, so that's fine. It can be from an older report.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Can you, Edith, can you scroll to that again? I think we could probably save something from that.
Great.
Can you go back there?
The reason I was asking is because that's what this was.
9.
Is
The
the
old-
result of that report. So I was just confused.
Same.
I think what I'm hearing, you could make a motion that a further report to examine potential operational models and service partnerships to Gold River, Tassus, and Sayward be prepared for the board's consideration, if that has any appetite.
I'll make that,
Okay.
that motion and, yeah.
I would like to propose an amendment. I don't think we want to, I know we said Tassus, but I would like to look at the option of having those connections from the smaller gravel-served towns, including air service being brought into this as well, to make those connections?
What about ships?
Sure, ships, whatever. Other transportation options to bring them into the backbone.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, so it's been seconded.
so in my mind, here's what I think. I mean, I'm happy to bring a report just so there's clarity on the intent of the motion. Look at operational models that examine service to Gold River, Tassus, Sayward, Zabalis, including other service delivery models such as float, air,
And ship.
and ship. How does that sound?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so Director Kurz, you move that? Okay, and seconded by
I do.
Director Wally? Okay, let's hash this around more. Is there? Okay, call the. Oh, Director Coburn. Kiddo.
Thank you for that. I'm okay with this. The staff is okay with this. I think it's really messy, and I don't particularly like it. I would much prefer, a resolution going through that would say that the board supports in, a report on an implementation of a West Coast transportation strategy that included the alternatives in the report, right? Like that would kind of make it more succinct, I think. But as long as staff kind of has that understanding that from the conversation that's happened here, that we're kind of, I hear around the table that we're kind of into exploring all of these alternatives, that 1 through 4 in today's staff report.
I think, Julie, yeah, and that's really my intent to do that, because there's obviously more reports with more detail to come back. I think one of the things we satisfied ourselves with was that there's interest from the board to continue exploring, and that's one of the goals we wanted to achieve. And we've heard other things that look at other operators, look at maybe groceries, transportation, ship, air. That's all encouraging. So I think we'll take that feedback and we'll bring back another report, examine some more details, some things we found, and try and get a little bit deeper into this.
Okay, we have,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on what our CAO has stated. I think just for further clarity for staff, if there's anything or any alternatives that are considered within this report that the committee is not in support of, I think it would be a good time now to give that direction to staff so that we can put some of these options to the side and really focus on those that are maybe more amenable to the committee. So if there are anything that's presented in this report that we don't want to continue pursuing, I think now would be an appropriate time. And certainly we can further our discussions on some of these options or alternatives as they are on page 3, items 1 through 4 in a subsequent report. But if there is anything, please do let us know now. Thank you.
okay. Okay, we have a motion. Let's vote on the motion. Oh, Director Sinnott has something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to give some direction to staff is put more of your effort into everything but dealing with transit. I think BC Transit is a big hill to climb.
Yeah. So, I'd like to hear from our corporate officer.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, this committee is making a recommendation for the board to consider, so I think there's opportunity for staff in another report, which will come to board, to say, here's what the committee is recommending, and that will be the opportunity for staff to outline what we believe this committee is asking for, and all of the details that go with that from today's discussion. That's my opinion anyways.
Yeah, I would agree. Director Von Ash.
I just wanted to reiterate Director Dahl's point around the service provider in Campbell River as a potential option. And then my only feedback to staff would be just really trying to avoid using electoral area gas tax funds. Thanks.
Okay, so Director Mooney, another question.
One more point on this.
Thank you, Chair. Just to the question that Ms. Nelson asked around, what we thought we wanted to see from the first 4 items in this report. And just to, I guess, sort of to echo what Director Sinnott said, this number 3 is really talking about initiating a discussion with BC Transit, and or whether it's partnering with Campbell River or establishing a separate transit service. And I think because we're sort of looking at very creative alternatives, including ships and planes, I don't think that concentrating on that number 3 piece is necessarily key at this time.
Director Colburn, you're next.
And I'm just hoping that with the report coming back, that won't preclude doing things like the alternative 2, which is just increasing awareness of what is actually available out there right now, because I think that piece as well is really key in the immediate future, to let people know.
Okay, let's call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, we're making progress.
Move termination?
Moved and seconded termination. All in favor? No one's opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Safe driving.
Bye all. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, Julie.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.